Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about relationships. Whether you're in a current relationship or you're single, you're going to want to tune in. Now, we are rewinding the clock to take a look at our relationship blueprints. How did they form? Where are they dysfunctional? And what we can do about it. And my hope is that this month you're going to gain some insights to make your relationships more fulfilling, more intimate, and ultimately more soul satisfying. So join me and let's start the conversation.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey everybody, it is Mary, and I am hanging out in my brand new office. I'm really excited about this. I finally bit the bullet, and I got a real office space, and this is the first time that I am recording a podcast episode in the office, so fingers crossed we can not have any background noise. So if we do, we're still working out the kinks. Be patient. But what makes today's episode even more exciting than being in my new office, because what does that matter to you? I am sitting across from my BFF and part-time co-host, Lindsley Brooks.
Hello. Your partner in crime.
My partner in crime, and especially for today's conversation.
Yes.
Because we are talking about dating.
Yep. We've been each other's wing women a few times.
I mean, more than a few times.
True.
I'm pretty sure I've called you on several occasions to say, hey, please come meet me.
Yep.
I'm thinking of one day in particular where I was like, please come meet me at the 5 Spot. Remember this?
Yes, I do.
A local Nashville music club. And I was like, just pretend you happened to just bump into me, but I really just need you as my support.
And man, we played that so good. My acting skills kicked in.
Girl, I was so grateful. Because, you know, sometimes, at least for me, it's challenging sometimes to like get out of a date.
Yeah.
It can be really awkward.
Yep. And you got to have your people.
It's like
to save you.
Oh my God. Like you got to have on the dial, like for me, anytime, obviously I'm now in a committed relationship, but it wasn't that long ago that I was out in the dating scene, and it was like, I needed to have your number.
Yeah.
A couple other people like who knew I was going out, who could answer the phone and be ready to answer no matter what was gonna happen.
I love it.
The emergency get out of a date call. But I'm excited about today's conversation because last week we talked all about intimacy and what does it look like to have intimacy with yourself first, and then what does it look like to have intimacy in your relationship and how you show up as an authentic person, as your real self, in order to create true connection. And that was a great conversation for people who are in relationships, current relationships, who are married or long-term committed relationships. And honestly, it was good for single people too, because they could rewind the clock and think about how they have been in past relationships and kind of take a relationship inquiry on some of their patterns. But I thought we need an episode where we address the single ladies.
Yep.
And I will say, if you happen to be in a relationship, don't turn this episode off. Actually listen, because I think you're going to find that this is an episode that there will be some helpful things to bring into your committed relationships. But Lindsley, let's talk about you for a second.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Okay. So you're single.
Yes.
Okay. And how long ago was your divorce?
Okay. So 5.5 years ago, got a divorce.
And you were married for how long?
We were married for 10 years, together for 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because I shared my story about my divorce last week, can you just give like a brief, like little synopsis sort of about your relationship and sort of what you felt like was the reason why that ended?
Yeah.
And then we can kind of come from that, at least that background, and then build from there.
Sure. Yeah. So we were young. We got married in our 20s. I think it definitely was a combination of a bunch of things, but I would say the heart of it was just a lot of codependency.
Yeah.
And some addiction stuff.
Yep.
And a lot of expectations about how I thought he was supposed to show up and how he thought I was supposed to show up. And so it was almost like he became, I became so focused on trying to get him healthy and well and fix him. And he was always feeling like I was trying to micromanage and control. And after a good long 7 to plus years of doing that, it starts eroding at the foundation. And, gosh, it's been so long now that I have nothing but love and peace around all that. We're still estranged.
Yeah.
Which is super sad to me, and hopefully we won't be one day. But, I think it's just that level of what you really believe that a relationship is supposed to be, right? We're told that, like, this person, I know you alluded to this last week, but it's like, this person is supposed to make me happy. This person is supposed to complete me, and I'm supposed to do the same for them. And if you're not doing that, then what's wrong with you? We have to figure out how to make you change,
right,
so that I can figure out how to feel better.
Yeah. Right.
And
it's always the focus is always on the other person's behavior,
yes,
and like
yes.
what they need to do to change.
Yep. And I constantly was trying to also fix myself in the same way, because I kept thinking, if I was just nicer, if I could just tolerate his drinking, if I could just accept him for who he was, then maybe if we could get Lindsley happy, then everything would be okay too.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you can't force somebody to change. And I finally had to accept that I can't change another person. And by no means does that mean that my behaviors and choices were, innocent, because out of that came my own pain, came some rebellion,
Sure.
and some of my own acting out. And because, when you make it all about somebody else, after a while, it becomes all about me. It's like the pendulum swinging. I was so used to just, like over giving and that after a while I was like, now it's my turn to just do whatever I want to do. Yeah. So it's just, it was a lot of unhealth. And, so all that to say, I have had another relationship since then that seemed to also be just as disastrous in a different way. And so it's really like, it's been a journey learning how to do healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And truly, I don't know if we're not taught that. None of us have parents that, because we're human beings. We're always going to kind of get things flawed, and there's grace around all of it. But man, I've been on this journey since divorce, which is 5.5 years ago. And then I've been single for over 3 years.
Yeah.
And have not had a committed relationship in over 3 years. So man, I never would have thought I would be, how old am I? 41, 42. I don't even know. And think that I'm a single woman. And, gosh, I kind of let go of whatever story I had for myself a long time ago. But, you just never think, wow, I never would have thought this would have been my story.
Well, and it's even more challenging when you've grown up with the idea that what makes you whole and what makes you a full human being is having that kind of person who completes you.
Yep.
And so then you find yourself in a situation where you're single, and obviously you've done so much work on your self-worth, on your sense of being worthy, of being valuable. But I know, because I know you and because I know my brain works this way too, that there's this like nagging leftover shame almost that I feel like we had to consistently battle. Because even for me, I think about, okay, if I were to be in a position where I'm single again, and that's not off the table, right? I mean, I'm not married.
Right.
And so I think about, okay, if I end up in that position again, it's like, how can you begin to own who you are and where you are when a partner isn't necessarily part of that puzzle at that given time? Not to say that isn't going to be part of your story moving forward,
right.
But in this moment, in the present, when I was in that place of being single, which is, how we even met.
That's right. Yeah.
Is being in the same place of life. It's like, okay, it's just different. It's different when you're older and you're single and you've done the relationship thing, in a way, you've done the marriage thing, and you and I, we don't have children, but a lot of people who are divorced have children, are still raising their children. And so it's an interesting place, I think, to kind of find yourself where you get an opportunity to think about, how do I want to do this moving forward? Like, how do I want to handle being single, i.e. being alone? But then how do I enter into a relationship from a place that is conscious, from a place that is more mindful, from a place that is coming from a healthy place versus like what you were saying, dude, I just had another dysfunctional relationship. And you hear about this all the time. You end up repeating, even when it feels so different than the time before, you kind of repeat these same cycles when you aren't addressing some of those root issues. So it's like, how do we break that? How do we break those cycles and enter into a relationship that really is like healthy?
Yeah.
And so you're out there, you're dating. Are you doing dating apps?
Yes.
Now you have a love-hate relationship.
I mean, who doesn't, right? Lord, if we're being honest. No, it is true. Like I always thought, oh no, I never want to do these dating apps. Those are whatever. Oh my gosh. Played that game with myself for a long time. And then finally you go, I mean, well, how else am I going to meet people unless I'm just sitting at a bar or a restaurant and somebody walks up to me? I mean, listen, I do believe that anything can happen and I could walk around a corner and I could meet my person.
Sure.
So I guess if anything, I'm just staying open to how I meet them.
Okay. I love that idea of being open because, typically you learn that when you think about your quote unquote soulmate, growing up, it's like there's not a lot of openness to that. It's sort of like there's some fear around don't miss it. Don't be in a situation where you couldn't find that person. You might be alone forever. But I like what you're saying here about being open, which to me is a new way of approaching this thing called dating.
Absolutely.
Because if you think about in your 40s, and for those of you who are listening, I would say anywhere between 25 and after, you're going to have some wounds.
Yeah.
You're going to have been hurt. Your heart's going to have been broken. Things have going to have happened either in childhood as it relates to your sense of self, love, belonging, and then certainly in a relationship. So to be open, I mean, that's scary when you've been hurt. So how are you doing that now? Like, how are you staying open when you've been on dates that are just,
hilarious,
horrible,
horrific. Well, I will say this. I heard somebody say this one time, and I think it's some of the best advice is like, sometimes you shouldn't be dating, you should be healing. And I think as a culture, we're so afraid of being alone.
Yes.
And we're so afraid of this word called single that, I mean, I have even been asked by a few guys like, how are you still single? And I'm like, you say that as if it's a bad thing.
Well, it's almost like if you're single, what that implies is something must be wrong with you.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And honestly, you have been such an inspiration to me because when I got out of my marriage, you were like ahead of me, you know, about a year ahead of me. And I felt like here is a woman who is doing single really well. And I still think that about you.
Yeah.
Like, I think that you are someone, and I know that you want to have a partner, but like, you don't have your life on pause.
Right.
Like, you live your life and you love your life.
Yeah.
Like, you really, like, you have this beautiful home. You have this thriving social life.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a full sense of life without a partner in this season of life.
Yeah.
And I think that this idea of loneliness, now for me, as a recovering codependent, Enneagram 2, where I have so much of my identity in pleasing others, giving to others, that was really, really hard for me.
Yeah.
And I haven't spent a lot of time alone, honestly. Like, I have been sort of a serial dater. Like, I got divorced, was already in a relationship, sort of. And like, you know, we were separated. I was basically entering into a different relationship and then just kept dating a bunch of different people. I was like, this is awesome. I mean, I got married at 20, right?
Why did I wait so long?
Yeah. And so I was dating several people at once. I was sleeping with a few people at once. You know, I was just like, oh my God, this is like a whole new world.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, just went nuts for a little bit. And as I tell people, when you get divorced, you know, you go crazy for about a year. So just kind of just know that that happens. But I think there is this idea, and I love that you're touching on this, is that there's such a fear of being alone. So even if you are in a relationship, that fear doesn't go away. It's not about staying single forever. It's like, you know, you picture the end of your life and you're alone. You know, you're dying alone. And for a lot of us, myself included, that has been the number one fear. And last year, I had to come to grips with that. I had to come to the place where I had to make peace with, what does it look like if I'm alone? Can I have a whole life without my person,
Yep.
without someone else there? And let me tell you, there were a lot of panic attacks that I had to walk myself through to get to the place of being comfortable with myself.
Yep.
And I remember, I was actually, this is right after I got divorced, or right in the process of getting divorced. I drove down to Florida, and I was staying in this condo for like a month, and it was like a 12-hour drive. And a friend of mine, she was like, "Oh, this is gonna be so fun. You're gonna, take this drive. You're gonna be by yourself. You're gonna get all this time in the car by yourself." And I looked at her and I said, "This is literally my worst nightmare."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just had so much anxiety about being alone with myself.
Yeah.
And she said, "Honey," she's a woman in her 60s. She said, "Honey, if you aren't excited about being with yourself, going on a drive, you got some things to figure out."
Yeah.
She goes, "I can't think of anything better than spending time with myself. I love myself. I'm interesting. I'm funny. My thoughts are really engaging. My conversations with myself are awesome." And she was like, "You got to start thinking of yourself like that." And that was a wake-up call for me.
Oh, sure.
Because if you think about going into a dating environment where you're just trying to get this hole filled,
Yeah.
and like you don't think of yourself as that interesting and you don't really want to be alone, I mean, it creates like this obsessive
You're
thing.
trying to fill a void, and think about who you'll attract in from that place. Another like empty bucket type person. And then you're both going to be having all these expectations about how this other person is supposed to fill you up. And it's two half people coming together, hoping that the other one's going to make them whole. I mean, I swear the most of us literally got married like that.
Totally.
And I truly not only think of like the married piece, but then we start dating like that. So we're just repeating the cycle. In fact, this is my personal opinion. Okay. There's no standard rule, but just like you said, with like that first year post divorce, you feel crazy. I mean, you literally are insane is what it feels like to me. And I have often like felt sorry for somebody who enters in a relationship that or overlaps with another one, because can you imagine, like, you haven't even really had time to integrate. You've been in such the mindset of we, that you've never found the sense of I or a sense of self. And then you're literally just transferring all your pain and suffering onto that other person. And you get no space to actually like acclimate and integrate and then do your individuation work, And so it is what it is. Like I said, that's my opinion. But there's that feeling of just like, you have to heal. And you want to do your work so that you don't have massive explosions hit down the road.
Right.
And just have one more broken, failed relationship after the next and then wonder why.
Well, and I think what's interesting, because I did the exact opposite. Like I said, I jumped right into a relationship. And what I would say in hindsight is having to do that kind of work alongside someone else is a lot harder than having to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Like it is, we can't control all of those things of when we meet people or whatever. However, I know that was extra challenging for me, like it was challenging to be dealing with my ex and all the stuff that I had unresolved from my previous relationship, and then trying to cultivate a new relationship and break habits and patterns. I mean, that's crazy making. I mean, it really is. And so there's this idea that I want to kind of get your insight on, which is bringing your whole self to attract another whole self. So you said, think about that. You have a half self and you attract somebody else who's also empty and trying to fill that void, and what kind of like magnetism that you are creating and who you are. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's something that we miss, is like looking at when we attract people and we go on dates and we complain about the quality of men. Oh, there's not any good guys out here, or this guy's a total crazy person or a loser or whatever. Do you think that's more of a reflection on what you're attracting and where you are personally? Or do you think that's just completely unrelated to who you are in your journey and stage?
I definitely think it's a reflection of what's going on for me. Like I will say, my relationship post divorce, I didn't even, it's like I was in a blind spot. Like I was still in a lot of grief and I was still trying to navigate this new world, and I was desperately wanting to have connection and intimacy. And so I think what I've realized through that journey is I accepted and allowed and turned a blind eye to a lot of red flags just because I didn't necessarily want to deal with it or didn't want it to be true. And I just wanted relationships so bad.
Okay, let's pause there because I think this is so important because I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like the idea of this red flag.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, because I think we all do this. Let's talk about the things that we tell ourselves to bypass that intuition, those red flags. So first, what were some of those red flags that you saw, and what did you have to tell yourself to sort of like pretend they weren't there?
Oh man. I mean, for him, he had just been recently divorced. And so I was like, well, this is that first year. He's just going through some stuff. There's a lot of chaos in his life right now. I mean, I was justifying for every which way.
Right.
And then I was like, everything will calm down. So, and then, I've even been doing that. I've noticed with some dates throughout the last couple of years, it'll be like, well, I shouldn't be so judgmental. I should just give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm probably being a little too demanding or too, like all these little internal conversations that make me just kind of curb my intuition or curb the little like red flag warning signs that said, this is probably not a good situation for you. This isn't probably healthy, but because we all just want to like make something work, especially if we're excited about it. And it's like, oh, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the longer and older we get, it's kind of like, I think it's a little bit easier to see the red flags now. Like when you get a little bit of distance, you go, yeah, I'm not going to put up with that.
Yeah.
But I think when you're coming out of a relationship, you're so eager and you haven't created that whole sense of identity that you are just needing that kind of connection. And I think we are wired and built for connection.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really beautiful thing to want that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that being in a relationship is such a beautiful thing. But I think when we turn a blind eye to those things that are very clear, like the way somebody treats other people.
Yeah.
Like I think that's always a good warning sign. Like I always look for, how does somebody tip the waitress, the server? How does somebody treat other people that he's coming in contact with?
How do they talk about their ex?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh my gosh, you guys. You want to hear, anytime somebody starts talking about how crazy their ex is, that has got red flags all over it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just the freaking truth.
No, it's totally the truth. And then I think, like, what are their relationships like with other people, like friends?
Yep.
Do they have
kids?
Do they have friends?
Or their parents? Yeah.
Those are all really helpful. And I think that we have to go into these situations and be critical in a way. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think we need to come at it from a place of, if I'm going to invest in this and spend some significant time, I want to make sure that I'm going to get a good ROI here.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. And you think about like all the energy that we put into relationships and how much of our lives it consumes, that return on our investment, there needs to be a high level of return. And it really goes back to where I am in my life. I'm going to attract those kind of people. Like I think about for myself, like if I'm in a place where I'm healthy and I'm not in a place of grasping or needing or seeking that kind of attachment, I'm going to attract somebody that is on that level, that is healthier, that has, healthy boundaries. If I have healthy boundaries, it becomes like a mirror. But I think one of the things that is interesting about relationships is that a lot of time, though, even in our best, we still have things that come up that get triggered from our old relationships, from our family of origin, from stuff that happens. And I really believe there are some things that can only be healed inside of relationships.
True. I agree. Yeah.
And I think that in some ways that's such a gift, is that oftentimes we do choose partners who help us heal some of those childhood wounds and stuff. So I'm curious for you, like when you think about that, as opposed to like dysfunctional, like kind of triggering that is unhealthy. Do you feel like you can catch that right away, like where you go, this person actually is going to be really healing for me, versus this person, I'm attracted to them out of like my own wounding and dysfunction?
Yeah. I remember a quote from Mary and Williamson that said, healthy relationships are for companionship and for healing. And that's truly it. They're not, but you can only, sometimes you don't want to have things get triggered and then it re-traumatize you though. Right. And
Right.
Just because your stuff is coming up for healing, as long as the relationship is able to hold it like a crucible and actually do the work of healing what the trigger is that's coming up, versus this thing comes up and then it never really gets resolved. And therefore you just keep getting re-traumatized.
Right.
Right. And so companionship and healing, that sounds wonderful in theory, but that truly is, they're not meant to be your end all be all. They're not meant to make you happy. They're not meant to, whatever it is, they're truly there to be your person, to be your partner, and it needs to be mutually beneficial. Right. And so if you're both equals in that you're willing to look at your stuff, hold the space for each other, and then literally do the work together. And I will say you and Bentley are really beautiful examples of that, just as your friend just, see that, because you both are very much committed to looking at your stuff and going in deeper,
Yeah.
And I would say that as, to add on what you were saying, like I've noticed that the warning signs are a whole lot more obvious to me now after being burned a few times.
Yeah.
Thinking that somebody's saying with their words that they are that kind of person, but then their actions don't line up.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot about when, your first fight, or when there's some sort of breakdown, or when you tell somebody no. Or, watch what happens when you tell somebody no and see how they respond. You'll get really,
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things, I definitely feel like I'm able to see things a lot more clearly now, because like what you said, my attachment to them having to work or to making them be this relationship, I don't have that scarcity, graspy attachment to it anymore.
Yeah.
And I guess that only comes from finally being comfortable with some of facing fears of being alone, facing fears of, you finally just walk through it and you're like, it's not as bad as I thought it was. I think I'm going to be okay. So no, thank you. You got red flags. Bye.
Totally. Well, it's like, it ends up being like, this is not worth it.
Mm-mm.
I mean, if you think about especially when you've been alone for a little while and you've cultivated this peaceful place.
Yes.
For somebody to come in and disrupt that,
oh,
I mean, it's just so not even worth it.
I am territorial about my serenity, y'all.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, it's like any person that threatens peace is not going to be a good match.
Mm-mm.
If there's fear, if there's anxiety, if there is shape shifting or trying to be somebody who you're not. And I think that comes back to like the fear of not being able to say no, the fear of I have to be who they want me to be, and I've gone through all kinds of places of that where I feel like I've got to be different than who I am, and finally feel like I've gotten to this place where it's like, this is it. This is me.
Yeah. Take it or leave it.
And I know the person I'm going to be with can appreciate and cherish who I am. And if you don't, I don't have space for that.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it anymore.
No.
And I think that when you look at coming into a relationship, okay, so let's talk about dating for a second, because we're getting in, like, what we're talking about is like, you got to work at getting to the place where you're growing together. You're doing your work together. Like Bentley and I did not start off that way. And through a lot of different things, we have had to really do our work together. I mean, in 4 years of being together, it's been, to hell and back over and over again. And getting to that place where we so appreciate each other and appreciate ourselves and are doing our own self-work and bringing it to the table. But when you're dating, you're not getting into that stuff right away. So I want to talk about some of like the little like funny, just to kind of lighten this up, think about like the funny cultural norms that I think, at least in the South, this is how we do, because now it's a new era. I mean, women have money now.
Yep.
Like
women have money now.
like, I mean, because before it's like, okay, so
Yeah.
this is the thing. I have money, right?
Yeah.
So like when I was dating, it was always that awkward thing of like, do I let a guy pay
Right.
or do I need to pay? Like, equality, all of that. So what's your stance on that when you go out?
It's interesting. I guess if we're going for drinks, I usually will just try to split it or whatever. But most of the time, I have noticed that men have offered to pay, and I feel good about that. It's kind of like they asked me out, so
that's
you know
good.
what I mean. It's kind of like when you and I go to lunch. If I ask you to lunch, I want to buy our, so I kind of treat it that way. I like the idea of, how we feel about healthy masculine.
Right.
Like, I like the idea of a man. Now, this is just my personal preference, just a man being able to hold the space and literally be a partner to me and like know that it's not about him owning me or taking care of me in some sort of like little girl mode. I don't need a daddy. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So no, I mean, I feel pretty good about if somebody wants to pay, but yeah, some girls, they're like, don't open my door. Don't,
Right.
like they don't like the whole gentleman vibe.
Well, so this is kind of interesting because I sort of like evolved from this because I was definitely in the camp of wanting men to pay for my things.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I got it.
Yeah.
Like, and like I've kind of come from, and don't get me wrong, when Bentley pays for something, it's awesome. I love it, and I'm so appreciative of that. But there's something that feels good about for myself paying. Now, if I were out dating, I think it would be kind of case by case basis, but I think I would think about it a little bit more than just like assuming.
Yeah, I don't want him to be a cheapskate. Like he better not just sit there and be like, "Oh, you got this one? Okay, thanks for." You know what I mean?
Totally. Well, and it sort of like goes back to this idea of like the princess, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And the
I'm not
prince,
about
like,
all that.
No,
Yeah.
so it's kind of finding that, and it's interesting. Like there's this weird dance between being interdependent and independent.
Yes.
So like, I remember when I first started dating Bentley. And we were at Loveless Cafe, and he was like, I'm gonna go get the car and I'm gonna bring it around. And I looked at him, I was like, you don't have to do that, it's like right there, I'll walk.
Right.
And he was like, no, I'm gonna come get you. And I was like, no, like I'm gonna walk. Like, don't bother yourself, I'm gonna go walk. And he looked at me and he goes, please let me do this for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, thank you.
Learning how to receive.
Yeah. And for me, that felt like I was going to be a burden.
Mm-hmm.
If he were to give to me, I would be a burden. And through our relationship, I've learned, like, let him take care of you. Let him walk on the outside of you and have that kind of protection.
Mm-hmm.
Let him open the car door for me. And so I've had to learn how to receive, but knowing that isn't diminishing my sense of independence or the fact that, yes, I can take care of myself and all that. That's not what he's saying. And so it's sort of like learning how to trust in that masculine energy that's coming from a healthy place.
Shoo, gosh, that opens up a whole podcast episode in itself, because if you think about it, as females, there's always, in dysfunction, there is an expectation. If he gives something to you, then you feel this strange obligation to have to do things or be a certain way or sleep with him or whatever else. And so, learning how to trust healthy masculinity, I truly believe is the work for the feminine right now.
Yes.
And especially with people like you and I and a lot of our friends who are, and I still call you single just because you're not married, so I don't mean to diminish, anything, but I'm saying like people who are trying to do healthy, conscious dating.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm noticing the ability to learn how to receive and to trust because I have developed a real strong independentness within myself. I don't feel that I need somebody anymore, but I want somebody.
Yeah.
And so, man, I haven't really had that experience yet. So I'll have to let everybody know how it goes when I actually do get in another committed relationship, because I imagine my hunch is that I'm going to come up against new areas of growth that are in my blind spot right now.
Yep.
That have to do with allowing some kind of partnership to come back into my life and to being able to receive and trust some of that.
Well, it's almost like if you think about having not a shield up, but like some kind of a barrier up,
Yeah.
it's letting that down and allowing somebody to take up space near you.
Yeah.
And for that to be okay, like to just, have a say so. Bentley and I just had a conversation this weekend about, him being able to offer ideas from a different perspective and me being able to hold some space to allow for a difference of opinion and to not just go, no, that's stupid or that's not the right thing, but to go, oh, this is somebody else's viewpoint, somebody else's way of seeing it. And how can I learn to appreciate that in that person? But I think what's so beautiful is, and we were talking about this before we even got on, it was this idea of dating, whether it's like casually or when you start dating more seriously, like that it really is a spiritual practice. I mean, it's sort of like opening up the heart and exposing vulnerably some of these areas. And again, choosing the safe person is a huge part of that.
Here. Yeah.
In fact, it's interesting. I remember being at a Tony Robbins event, and he said that I believe the statistic is that 80% of the success of your relationship is in the picking of the right person. And I thought, ooh, like think about that for a second. Like think about how successful or unsuccessful your relationship will be based on the person you choose.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Because if you choose somebody who is conscious, who is present, who is doing their own work, all of those different things, you can work through so much, work through stress, work through, all kinds of things that happen, COVID, losing a job, losing a parent, whatever it might be. But when you are in a position where you're with somebody who you don't have that with, it's going to make everything so much more challenging. So the spiritual discipline is first being able to choose that person who is a good, healthy match. And the second piece, and I think this is what we're talking about, is now that you have the safe person, what does it look like to begin to open up even more and let them in?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. And, and like I was sharing with you, like I've actually been calling even just the dating apps and all this kind of stuff. I have been calling it my spiritual practice right now because it's a practice for me to be as truthful and as authentically me as possible. And so like I hate to say it this way, but I'm like using this app. I'm using my dates as a really, and great if I meet somebody amazing, but it's like sitting in the discomfort of maybe being authentic about how I think about something or what my views are on things, or if what they're saying to me is an agreement with how I want to live my life. Like, up until probably the last couple of years, I would have just kind of thought, like we said earlier, oh, well, we'll deal with that later. Right. Oh, I don't really like that about him, but it's not that big of a deal, and I don't want to be too picky. And so now I'm kind of saying, what would it be like if I actually just showed up authentically, truthfully me, and that the parts of myself that I love, and I want to be that person, right? No matter what. So let me tell you, it sounds wonderful in theory. It is very difficult. Yeah. And that's why I say it's a spiritual practice, because it requires me to pull from within myself and to actually ask for a higher power to help me stay as authentic and truthful and the things I can control, right? Like,
well, yeah. And like from day one.
Yes.
And that's when I was recently dating, that was one of those things that I did. Same exact thing. I love that you're bringing this up, because it was like, I'm going to practice.
Yeah.
I'm going to practice and see like how long I can hold on to myself and notice when I start people pleasing.
Yes.
Right. Like notice when I start agreeing when I have no business agreeing, or like, they say they like something about somebody else, and then I start like being like that, or they talk about things they don't care for in women, and I gotta, make sure I don't do that. Don't call too often, don't text too often, whatever it might be. And really, I love that, like being able to hold on to your sense of self. And that is such a practice. That's a practice inside of committed relationships. That's a practice in dating. That's a practice in marriage, with your children, with friends. Like holding on to that sense of self and being able to sort of be a witness to the temptation and the pull to be liked.
And where you give yourself away. And like, I love
Yes.
what you're saying. And you know what? I truly believe that staying in that place of integrity with yourself builds a strong sense of self-worth and self-confidence, so that if they aren't into that, you can say, okay, no big deal. Bless you and release you. Where the old way of doing it is like, I'm slowly eroding at myself, not in a place of integrity,
Right.
slowly eroding at my self-confidence. And then when they reject me, because they didn't ever really even know me, so then I internalize it and take it personal.
Right.
But really, it's my own anger and frustration that I just completely abandoned myself in that whole journey.
God, isn't that the truth?
You know what I'm saying?
It's a new level of awareness
Yeah.
to be able to be conscious in that way.
Yeah.
And I think when you can be, and when you can like go into a date from that place of sort of like, oh, let's just like practice. Let's just experiment and let's just see if I can do this. And no shame if I find myself in a position where I'm saying something that's not in integrity or that's out of alignment with who I am. Notice it. Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
Like, why did I feel the need to be that way towards them?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just kind of notice how that feels. Okay, so switching the subject, because I think this is going to be just fun for the last few minutes that we have together. So when you're going out on dates, what's your getting ready routine? Like, how do you like get yourself in the mood to like go out?
Well, I immediately put on Beyonce.
Yes.
No, I think, you know, it's funny. I haven't really thought of this through, but I kind of wear the same outfit every time for the first date.
Yeah.
I'm just now realizing that because it's such a thing. I'm like, what am I going to wear?
Totally.
So I've kind of noticed that should tell you how often I'm dating, that I actually have a uniform that I wear. That's so funny.
It makes sense though.
I mean, right?
Takes the stress out of it.
Yeah, totally. But no, I just try to like be in a good space, and I definitely do my own self-coaching in that, like, I try not to have expectations.
Yeah.
I just go into it saying, you know, this is supposed to be fun. Enjoy yourself. Don't have like the pressure to perform. I have a tendency to kind of go into that place a lot, especially with the 7 part of me.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that I don't have to prove myself or perform or be anybody that's not me, you know?
Yeah.
And just, so I do a lot of self-coaching, nothing too much because I don't want to get too much in my head. I just try to have fun and turn on some fun music and start dancing.
I love it. I love it. I think that music is just such a way
Everything.
to get yourself in a
Yes.
mood, get ready to go. And I think that, you know, in anything, whether it's this or even in my relationship now, it's like I keep having to come back to holding it with an open hand and really like that sense of scarcity of like, this has to work, or this has to be the one, or this better turn out.
Yep.
Creates so much stress and tension. It's like strangling the
Yes.
energy of a relationship. And I think whether it's casual dating, like you're talking about, and you're just kind of getting to know somebody, or whether it's, you're dating somebody long term, it's like, how can I hold this with an open hand and realize this person, this date isn't mine.
Right.
I don't own them. I don't, like this person really isn't mine to hold. It's sort of like really creating some non-attachment to the situation. And that feels really freeing.
Yes.
Like when you can go, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's just be present for what's here. And I think that's a huge thing, is like, be really, really present.
Well, and I think too, I'm noticing as you said that, one thing the newest conversation is I'm trying to choose what's best for my heart as opposed to what is maybe like, so I'll just give a personal example. I had a date recently, and he very much was clear from the very beginning that he just wanted to have fun.
Yeah.
And he wasn't looking for a relationship. Well, he was really hot. And I actually had a moment where I thought, well, I want to have fun, right? Like, I could do that. And so we had this full-on conversation about what it would look like if we just had a fun relationship. And it wasn't until later that night when I went home that I thought, just because I can do that doesn't mean that my heart wants that right now. I actually I am looking for a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So why would I do something that's going to set my heart up to get hurt?
Right.
Because if my heart wants a relationship, and yet just because I can, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having fun, I'm just saying for myself, it'd be a little bit of a betrayal to my heart. So I had to tell him, I said, listen, you'd be a lot of fun to have fun with, but my heart it wouldn't be good for my heart. And I am looking for a relationship right now. And he's like, totally understand. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
And I avoided what would have definitely been a huge heartbreak because
Totally.
I would have gotten attached. I know me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we've been doing this too long now.
I was gonna say, yeah. And I just love, and I think this is partly a new way of being inside of
Yeah.
relationships, which is to have those kinds of conversations up front of like, what is it that you're looking for?
Yeah.
What is it that you want? Because you can't assume that the person sitting across from you wants the same thing you want. Like, even if they're saying all the right things, you cannot assume until you've asked the question point blank, which is scary.
So scary.
Because, you know, there's a real chance that it's not the answer you want to hear.
Yeah.
But it's like, God, it's better to know than spend the next 6 to 8 weeks of your life in this emotional upheaval.
Yes.
And then have to repair and recover again. It's like, ugh, I
Because
don't want to have to rebuild.
Aren't you so sick of like, what are the signs? Does he like me? Does he not? But he hasn't texted. Should I text him? Like, if you are confused, that is your sign.
Totally. Well, and like just having that conversation up front of like, hey, like, let's just get that out of the table.
Yeah.
You're really cool.
Yeah.
But like, here's a couple things that I'd love to know.
Yeah.
And you can do that in a way that's not creepy or too
Yeah.
intense, or like you can have those kinds of real conversations. But I would much rather have that now from day one.
Yes.
And just know. I mean, obviously there's going to be some mystery involved. You don't know the person that well. There's plenty of time to get to know each other, but I feel like there's some things that it will be really helpful to know up
Yeah.
front.
Fundamental, basic, like truths just need to be established. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, in conclusion, I am curious, what would be one piece of advice that you would give to any woman out there who's in the current dating scene? Maybe who's been in it for a while. Maybe they're just getting going in it. What piece of advice would you give?
Get to know yourself really well and like learn how to be alone, even if that means just like a day or something you're not talking to anybody. But just start getting comfortable with yourself on like a heart level so that you can start making decisions from that solid sense of self, and then choose your heart every time. Choose what's best and healthiest and most nurturing and most loving and supportive for your heart. And that when you make decisions, even when it's difficult from that place, it's going to be your north. That's going to guide you to your person. And I truly believe in energy so much that the more you choose that, that means they're choosing that too. And y'all will be a vibrational match and find each other. Yeah.
Love it. Well, this has been a fun conversation. One we don't typically have. I love it.
I love it too.
Well, y'all make sure to tune in next week. We're going to have a great conversation with a special guest all about committed relationships and how to stay in one for a long, long time. So you're not going to want to miss that conversation. But until then, remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. Talk to y'all next week. Bye. Hey y'all, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.